And welcome to the program. Great to have you with me. Thanks so much for being here. I know you have a choice in where you can listen each and every day. And folks, I'm telling you, this is one of the most important segments that we'll do. I mean, how can I say, the FTC and pointing out what's happening at the Supreme Court, and that the administrative state's kangaroo courts could well meet their end in the next session of the United States Supreme Court. That would be monumental. We're the only ones covering that story. We covered it for you in the last half hour. The what's happening to our children, the pedophilia and the grooming that's taking place. Free speech. But this segment right now is so critically important, and I'm so pleased, number one, to have my co-host with me, President of Americans for Limited Government, Rick Manning. Rick, welcome. Good to have you. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you for having me. This is an important segment, and I think be armed and with knowledge about what's going on so they know how to talk about it to those who don't have exposure to this program. This is extremely important.
And our expert relative to this issue, and I couldn't think of a better person to bring on than a former CIA station chief who served this nation during mostly the time when the CIA and the FBI actually behaved and fulfilled their true roles, or at least the majority. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are watching Biden's brown shirt Gestapos, the American Gulag.org, from the D.C. jail, the D.C. Capitol Police, who will investigate you if you host your congressman in your home, to the behavior of the FBI knocking down Americans' doors and dressing in full armor and bringing armored vehicles onto the streets of America and handcuffing and putting on their knees 10-year-old girls. True story. Watch Capitol, Capitol, punishment.com. Capital Punishment, the movie. Nick Searcy just lays the facts out. You decide, but he gives you the facts. I welcome the station chief, Scott Eulinger, to the program. Scott, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greg. Glad to be here again.
As a former member of CIA, as a former member and understanding the difference, the FBI is supposed to deal with the domestic issues. The CIA is our intelligence apparatus, and having been a former Russian linguist in military intelligence in the Cold War, and I don't want to overstate that, but having been in the position that you were in and now watching what's happening with these agencies and to God-fearing, Constitution-loving, patriot Americans, how concerned are you, Scott?
I am very concerned, Pastor Greg. Basically, what I've seen is, I believe I've seen these organizations morph into something that's absolutely unrecognizable. At a minimum, we're looking at services like whether it's the FBI or the CIA that are no longer able to do their jobs effectively. That's at an absolute minimum, and I would say that also extends to the U.S. military now. And that's because political correctness and all has basically slowly, and this started it really got into high gear during the Obama administration, has slowly driven competent people out of its ranks. Now, of course, there remain competent people, but a lot of competent people have retired for whatever reason, one reason or another, or have been forced out. And basically now it's a matter of these people are promoted because they have the proper political affiliation, because they represented New America, etc. And so these people have slowly replaced the competent people. So although the CIA's work is always secret, I would gamble my reputation on the fact that I'm sure if you look at the number of people, as intelligence sources recruited, the number of important intelligence gathered, the number of reports, that these things have plunged precipitously, let's say in the last 10 years or so. And it's all, and so that's at a minimum. We have organizations that are no longer able to do their job effectively. That puts us all in danger. But even worse, many more signs, especially with the FBI, that but also including the CIA, that these organizations are actively working against patriotic Americans. And so that's the double win.
Rick, your thoughts?
Wow, that's just stunning, and it's a conclusion that I had come to looking from the outside looking in, but to hear it from somebody who's been on the inside is terrifying, quite honestly. Let me ask you the obvious follow-up on this. We have seen the Obama administration essentially wipe out the middle ranks of officer ranks, the majors and the like, about 10 years ago through a change they made at the Pentagon, and basically encourage retirement of people who are mid-level. And we've seen a transition in the FBI since Mueller was head of it, to where they have essentially made willingness to serve in Washington, D.C. at headquarters one of the premium things that we have in terms of a promotion. And so the genuinely brilliant field agents who are knowing what's going on are being replaced by bureaucrats who will do what they're told. How did what's happened with the CIA? Was this a Brennan thing, or has this been ongoing for a longer period of time in terms of infiltration and turning the CIA mission away from what it's supposed to do?
That's an excellent question, Rick. You phrased it very well. It's clear that you really know about this problem. This happened actually before the Obama administration started getting into gear. Political correctness has been around since the 90s. It was around then, but it went into higher gear after 9/11, and then it went into turbo overdrive under Obama. But for specifically, what we saw after 9/11 was a huge influx, and this is the same with the FBI, a huge influx and budget increase to the intelligence community and law enforcement community to keep us safe. So they brought in massive amounts of new people. The amount of people that became, for instance, operations officers like myself, literally, and I came in 96 when that was the absolute nadir of recruiting. By 2001, they literally were taking in classes that were 10 times bigger than my class.
Wow.
They went from taking in 20 people to taking in a year, 20 people in a year in the agency to do what I did, the operations work, to taking in more than 200. So what happened was, that's when quality control starts getting away from you a little bit. I mean, if you open up floodgates 10 times, you're going to get other people in there. Some people are less than competent. But what I'm saying is then also as the political correctness took up steam, then that was reflected in promotions. You talked about, that was a very, very good point you had about how the willingness to serve in Washington with the FBI, that's the perfect example. What you started seeing very much in the agency, let's say by the early 2000s, was despite the fact that you needed people in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and all these other very bad and dangerous places, the rate of promotion of officers, and especially analysts, and remember, analysts are only basically digesting the intelligence that the operators are collecting. And there's a lot more analysts than there are collectors on the ground, people such as myself. You saw those analysts in Washington being promoted at a much faster rate than field officers. I remember being in Washington, and I really was an experienced case officer, and literally seeing people who had just entered the agency. 4 years later, I come back from overseas assignments, and that person is my superior in rank, although she wasn't telling me what to do. But what I'm saying was she was a higher GS level than I was. And I was the guy in the field in places like Tajikistan. But she had been promoted in 4 years at like a stratospheric rate because I guess she was the right type of person. You see? So this kind of bureaucracy So the bureaucracy.
So in essence, what happens is people who serve the Washington D.C. master get promoted, and those who are out doing the work get forgotten.
That's right. That's right.
That's a story of Washington D.C. bureaucracy, by the way.
And ideology obviously is playing a role as it relates to that as well. The willingness to go along with this changed ideology you've talked about. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Thomas Renz, for those of you who have been watching our program, you've been watching him talk with Senator Ron Johnson about the impacts, neurological impacts on our pilots of the injection. We'll talk about that when we come back. And a destroyed plane.
My passion is the fight for freedom. My father fought for in World War II defending our country. Today, we are no longer fighting with guns. Instead, we are fighting an ideological battle for control of our country by contributing to causes that support your constitutional rights. I am Patriot Mobile.
Use the code CHOSEN for free activation. Call 972-PATRIOT, 972-PATRIOT. Call today. Use the code CHOSEN, patriotmobile.com/chosen. Greetings, Children Generation Army. I'm so grateful to be connected with you, my listeners. You are some of the most engaged, responsive, loving, and caring people I know. I need to bring to your attention an urgent need for our ministries in India. While there has become a focus on the Uyghurs in China, our ministries in Jammu, Kashmir, and Punjab are being terrorized by those same Uyghurs, the Taliban, and the mounting CCP army at the border of India. Between these threats and the lockdowns, we find ourselves in need of additional financial support. I'm asking for your help to support these pastors and their families, our orphans, our widows, our Bible students, and our community outreaches. $15 will feed a pastor's family for a month. $20 funds our sewing school instructor, and $150 a week funds our base operations, the orphans, the Bible school students, even the sewing school, and our senior Indigenous pastor Samuel. So please go to paypal.me/Pastor Greg. That's paypal.me/Pastor Greg, or you can call me at 209-380-8654, 209-380-8654 to make your donation over the phone. Please call us, contact me today, and make your best donation. Thank you, and God bless you. Hi, I'm Pastor Greg, host of the Chosen Generation Radio Show, heard on the Truth Broadcasting Network and seen on TECNTV.com Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern, where I discuss today's most important issues through a biblical constitutional lens. TECNTV.com appreciates our partnership with NTD, and we'd love for you to give our great programming a view. That's TECNTV.com, Chosen Generation Radio with Pastor Greg. God bless you, and God bless America.
You can support Chosen Generation and make a tax-deductible donation by visiting www.chosengenerationradio.com. And now, back to Chosen Generation with Pastor Greg.
And welcome back to Chosen Generation Radio, where no topic is off limits and everything filtered through biblical glasses. My guest, Scott Eulinger, retired CIA station chief, and my co-host, Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government president. You can find both of them at cgcontributors.com. That's CG Contributors at chosengenerationradio.com. What am I thinking? chosengenerationradio.com. CG Contributors. Find them there. Hey, if you'd like to get one of these beautiful Chosen Generation Radio mugs, they're a great coffee mug, got a lid that goes with them. If you'd like to get one of those, make a donation today, would you? I talked a little bit about India. If you want to learn more about that, go to cg4i.com, cg4i.com. Support our radio ministry at chosengenerationradio.com. Any donations today that we receive, we'll reach out to you with regards to these Chosen Generation Radio mugs. You can enjoy your coffee, your tea, whatever you drink in a wonderful Chosen Generation Radio mug. You might get somebody to say to you, "What is that?" And you can talk about America, the Constitution, God, country, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How about that? Great conversation starter. All right, we were talking about the change in the hiring practices, the change in promotion practices, how basically the CIA and the FBI, the ship was shifted. I want to talk a little more about that. And then I want to come to something, Scott, that you brought up right before we went on air, and it's related to the injections. Thomas Renz and Lee Dundas were testifying before Senator Ron Johnson regarding the dramatic impact of injections in the last year on our military. 3 DOD witnesses have come forward, whistleblowers, with unredacted documentation to prove what's really going on. And you mentioned something about an airplane crash. Let's do that, and then we'll come back to this other. But you mentioned something about and we lost an F-35, and they've now admitted. What's the story here?
The F-35, which is the newest single-engine fighter that the military has, there's a carrier version, there's a Marine Corps version, and there's an Air Force version. Well, the naval version, I believe, was on the carrier that right now is in the actually, I forget what the carrier
South China. Isn't it South China State?
South China State. It is in the South China State. You're right. And it crashed, and what they said was, and actually there was a number of flight crew hurt, which is relatively unusual. But so I don't know the exact details of the landing. It seems like it was a crash landing as opposed to like an in-flight failure. Okay. But anyway, I've read some stuff that reports that the pilot was having a reaction to an injection.
There you go.
Having a medical incident.
Yep.
And so that, and the F-35, I think, retails for about $300 million for one aircraft. That's a disaster of a program and merits one show by itself. But the point is, so now the aircraft is at the bottom of the South China Sea, and now the United States is concerned about retrieving it before the Chinese do, so they can figure out what is wrong with that, so they can basically, reverse engineer the aircraft. That is, if they don't have the complete plans already. The pilot, by the way, was recovered, and he's not dead. He's injured, and he's in the hospital, I believe.
Well, I'm sure he's quite injured.
I know it.
Yeah. Oh, do you know the story?
Yeah, I knew he parachuted. Yeah, he parachuted out, and they recovered him. There's actually a compelling picture that was on somewhere. I don't remember where I saw it, but a compelling picture of the plane actually in the water before it sank. So this is a circumstance where they know exactly where it is, but so do the Chinese. And so one of the, it's going to be a great race essentially to that location to try to recover this plane. And as you said, the Chinese want the plans for the F-35. They want the ability to
reverse
figure it out because they are in fact trying to build a military designed to defeat our best aircraft, our best ships. And so this is really really important,
critical.
And so pay attention, because there may be some stuff talking about this, but the one thing you won't hear is that the pilot ended up failing because of a reaction to an injection.
Because he was having
that won't be covered in the Washington Post.
Because he was having a neurological failure. And this is exactly what the clip that we've been playing of Thomas Renz and Lee Dundas testifying about this, and a DOD flight surgeon who has signed an affidavit saying that there's been a 1,000% from 82,000 to 863,000 cases, comparing just in 1 year to the previous 5-year average. And this is just one of those instances, and the cost, not only in the injuries and how devastating that is to the families, right, involved in this.
Right, exactly.
The life,
and more important, how our enemies.
There you go. Yes.
The increased chance of war, because that's the problem, is that as other nations, it's not just the Biden administration's incompetence, but as other nations see these failures, whether it's in Afghanistan, Iraq, that's a disaster, or these things, it makes the case of the chances of war greater because they perceive a weak, divided, and God forbid, an incompetent United States. And then these people are going to say, you know what? We are going to roll into Taiwan because I think that this is our best chance right now. We have to seize the moment before the Americans get their act together and do it now while we have the time. And so, that's always a bad situation.
And so let me pivot this because here we're talking about, the foreign relations aspect, the international aspect, and quite frankly, the actual purpose and goaling of the CIA, which is the gathering of intelligence, understanding these issues. But instead, this CIA, this FBI, in today's world, are more focused on what's happening inside of America and not going after terrorists, as you talked about, Rick, the fact that they're not going after jihadi terrorists. They're not investigating mosques. In fact, the mosques in Boston, the FBI has been told, don't go in there, don't bother them, don't harass them, don't talk to them. And yet we know that they are producing more jihadis and more terrorists than any of the other mosques in the United States, although there is a race now amongst them. But my point, gentlemen, is that instead of actually defending our country against true enemies, domestic and foreign, we have an FBI and a CIA as an operational status due to ideology that are actually going after American citizens like the three of us.
That's right. And it's a sad state on human nature. But, there's been a lot of studies on this. And, the Nazis, despite their human rights, their atrocities and such, when they did investigations after the war, they found out a lot of these horrible people who have blood on their hands were, in fact, disturbingly normal people. These were not people who had traumatic backgrounds. They were normal people who were indoctrinated into a society and did what they were told to do. And I think there is a chilling comparison between that and what is going on in the United States. Because for years, I've written about the politicization of the CIA. Literally, people can find my writings on that 7 years ago, 8 years ago. But what I'm saying is now, and look at the last 5 years at least, how many, with all of the terrible things that have been done that the CIA did and the FBI did, spying on the Trump campaign, et cetera, how many people, quote, whistleblowers, unquote, came forward? How many people said, my conscience, I cannot tolerate this anymore, and I'm going forward and saying something? And the answer is pathetically few or zero. And the bottom line is why? Because an average person nowadays, without a moral compass, with a mortgage to pay, doesn't want to stick their head up. They don't want to stick their neck out to get it chopped off. So they go along to get along.
Yep, that's exactly right. And all you need to do is look at what happened to Adam Lovinger, who pointed out that we're funding this Stephen Halper guy. What the heck is that about? And he ended up getting fired. He ended up getting destroyed. And then he ended up not having... He basically never was made whole, and the whistleblower laws were meaningless because he was whistleblowing on an administration that was protected.
Look what happened to Phil Haney. Look what happened to our friend Phil Haney. Phil Haney was murdered. All of his belongings have been taken. His travel trailer, his truck, all of his electronics, everything is gone, removed, taken by the FBI.
That's right.
But no ongoing investigation. I'm in touch with the family almost every week. I'm the pastor that prayed with him and visited with him and talked with him and texted with him 2 days before he was murdered. No one's talked to me. Amador Valley Sheriff, no. And they have my number because I've called them multiple times. The FBI never reached out to me, never interviewed me. Nobody is saying a word. It's as if it never happened. And I'm going to tell you, and Scott, I think you could vouch for this. I know Rick will as well. Phil Haney was one of the most intelligent intelligence resources in our nation. And
it's a fact. It's an absolute fact. I read his book.
And-
I would think I was on your show with him. I was on several programs with the man, and his book was very impressive. The guy was an incredible national resource. That is the absolute truth.
And he was a guy who spoke truth, and
right.
he got blown up out of the federal government and out of Homeland Security because of it. And he ended up being and he ended up losing his life. And I think, like you do, Greg, he was murdered.
Yeah.
They call it a suicide, but he was murdered.
Yeah.
And the actions of those agencies afterward, that somebody with his background, with his knowledge, was killed under suspicious circumstances, their willingness to sweep it under the rug is chilling
Yeah.
at best.
To all of us. All right, we're out of time, folks. Scott Eulinger, Station Chief, the Station Chief. Follow him on Twitter at the Station Chief. Rick Manning at limitgov.com, getliberty.org. God bless you. God bless America.